Often reviled, occasionally respected, but now frequently ridiculed. That's the global reputation of the CIA. After the failings in Iraq, the agency now finds itself implicated in financial and sexual scandal. The CIA's former executive director, one of America's biggest defense contractors, and a now jailed senior congressman stand accused of forming a circle of corruption involving tens of millions of dollars. It's a bad time to be a spy.
It's astonishingly sleazy, with connections between congressmen, poker, defense contractors, prostitutes, and shadowy CIA figures.
Secluded among the forests in Langley, Virginia, CIA officers have felt under siege. Not from foreign enemies, but from President Bush and his administration. At the start of the Bush presidency, the then CIA director George Tenet was his great ally. Indeed, Tenet's been criticised for telling the president only what Mr. Bush wanted to hear.
Within the agency, I think Tenet was very popular. Nevertheless, I think there were deep feelings within the agency that they were being pressured to come out one way or another
to provide intelligence to suit the political wishes of the politicians.
That's what you hear from people.
The key missing piece from his nuclear weapons program.
This reached a high or low point when Colin Powell told the UN Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, while Tenet, who'd given him the script, sat at his shoulder. When Iraq turned bad, the Bush team turned on the CIA. George Tenet was sacked.
There is a feeling at the White House that the CIA had been disloyal to them at a certain point. So George Tenet leaves as director. Porter Goss comes in, and he is a party man in a way. I mean, he is perceived by the White House to be very loyal to the White House goals.
The essence of our intelligence capability is people.
He brought in a number of aides around him who were also Republicans on the Hill, in Congress mainly, and that they were wanting to weed out the disloyal members.
The president didn't say it, but in reality, with Porter Goss as director, Bush was demoting the CIA.
Thank Director Goss for his hospitality. It's such a pleasure to come out and see hundreds of folks who work here at the Central Intelligence Agency. I came for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to assure the people here that their contribution was incredibly vital to the security of the United States.
In what looked like a purge, CIA station chiefs and senior officers left by the dozen. Morale plummeted as Goss and his team focused on their priority, to stop CIA leaks to the press.
I don't like leaks, and I tried to prosecute them myself in the different positions that I had in government. But if that's your main goal, the way it's perceived if you're a staff member is as a purge, as a witch hunt.
So, fear and loathing at the CIA, and down the road in Washington, D.C., a parallel and equally lurid picture was developing. An investigation into alleged corruption among politicians on Capitol Hill would stretch ultimately all the way back to CIA headquarters and to the man Porter Goss had put in charge of the day-to-day running of the CIA. But first, a congressman would go to jail.
On Capitol Hill today, news of one of the worst cases of corruption to come out of Congress in a long time. A congressman from California named Randy Cunningham, known as Duke, admitted to accepting more than $2 million in bribes.
When Congressman Randy Duke Cunningham was jailed for taking bribes from military contractors, a trail was exposed which would lead all the way to the CIA. Cunningham lamented what he'd lost.
The trust of my friends and family.
The Cunningham investigation had uncovered an opulent, corrupt and loose Washington where everything and everyone could be bought and sold.
There's really been this concept that you have to pay to play in Washington right now. If you want government contracts, you pay congressmen, so you really pay to get what you want.
Some, like Cunningham, were paid and played to excess. Gambling and girls were said to be favoured perks at chic Washington hotels like the Watergate.
At this point, you would think nobody in Washington would ever go to the Watergate for anything, but no, people don't learn that lesson.
Remarkably, this is the third time in 35 years the Watergates provided a backdrop for a great American scandal. Most memorably, Richard Nixon's henchmen broke into the Democrats' offices here, and then Monica Lewinsky was living at the Watergate when she conducted her thing with Bill Clinton, and now we have this tale of poker, prostitutes and bribes.
There were parties at the Watergate in which there were poker games, and at the poker games, defense contractors were always losing tens of thousands of dollars to members of Congress. And really what this was a way to basically pay off congressmen who were providing government contracts to these defense contractors.
The defence contractor whose Watergate apartment was allegedly used for these parties was Brent Wilkes, a man who'd had $100 million worth of business put his way by the politician Randy Cunningham. According to prosecutors, Wilkes also had a second significant corrupt relationship with a childhood friend, Kyle Dusty Fogo. Fogo, a CIA man for over 20 years, had recently been promoted by Porter Goss and was now running the agency day to day.
It is corrosive. I'm told, involves not just people at the agency, but also their oversight committees.
It has also been discussed that there were prostitutes available at some of these parties, and we know this from Mitchell Wade, who's already pleaded guilty. And the FBI was, a couple of weeks ago, trying to speak to lots of prostitutes in Washington to find out who might have been involved with some of the members of Congress.
With Dusty Fogo now transformed to executive director of the CIA, its alleged Iraq presented plenty of opportunities for corrupt contracts. At one point, Fogo emailed his friend Wilkes to say, "I am now, have been in the past, and will continue to, as long as I breathe, be your partner. So what do you want me to do?" Wilkes wanted the contract to sell American troops bottled water. Fogo, it said, pulled CIA strings to ensure he got it.
There are literally billions of dollars suddenly available to defense contractors, and people have created whole new businesses and have become multimillionaires thanks to the Iraq War.
They deny everything, but in return for steering $1.7 million worth of contracts to Wilkes, Fogo is said to have received a $44,000 Scottish holiday, a $32,000 break in Hawaii, and the promise of a top job with Wilkes once he'd left the CIA. In the event, he had to leave when the FBI raided his home. His mentor, Porter Goss, had resigned suddenly and mysteriously as CIA director only days earlier.
My own personal view is that this is one of the reasons for the fairly rapid and sudden departure of Porter Goss. I think they felt that he wasn't extirpating this problem. Some of the people were friends and longtime colleagues, and I think out of a sense of fairness or whatever, it wasn't being dealt with. That's what I hear from my friends in the administration.
I want to thank Mike for agreeing to serve our nation once again.
The CIA now has its third director in 2 years. Colonel Tom Hayden has replaced Porter Goss and his team of political loyalists.
All of us here and around the world, thank you for the faith you have placed in this agency.
So the reign of terror, or at least the reign of recrimination at the CIA, is over. A clear and deliberate signal of the ceasefire is the appointment as deputy director of a respected official who'd resigned in protest at the Porter Goss regime. But the CIA he rejoins is a diminished organisation. It no longer has the ear of the president. The CIA, long used to ducking questions about its clandestine activities overseas, will now face inquiries about contracts and corruption within the US defence industry.